Hi everyone, my name is Scott and welcome back to the channel and another episode of What I've Been Watching. I watched 6 movies this last weekend. Let's talk about them. A couple of these aren't going to take very long, including the first one. Trading Places is a 1983 comedy starring Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy, and it was directed by John Landis. It's a movie I had never seen before, and watching John Landis's movies, especially his comedies, through the back half of the 70s, the early part of the 80s, is kind of a strange experience, but you have to take into account that they didn't shoot movies for home video back then. There's long pauses between jokes because they're waiting for laughs to dissipate in the theater, a place where you would see the movie once, maybe twice, and then it was never available again. Home video was not a thing people thought about because it largely didn't exist yet. This movie, which I hadn't seen, it's a pretty good satire of 80s era greed and corruption. It doesn't go its entire running time without a couple cringy moments. I mean, it has an entire sequence where Dan Aykroyd's in blackface. Yikes. The third act gets a little silly and slapsticky, but for the most part, it's an amusing, funny, if not laugh out loud satire of how the 80s was as far as capitalism was concerned. I enjoyed it as a piece of history. As a movie these days, little cringy. November Criminal stars Ansel Elgort and Chloe Grace Moretz, and it was directed by Sasha Gervasi, I think is how you say that name. What if Ryan Johnson's Brick was boring and unmemorable? Ansel Elgort plays a high school student who has lost his mother due to cancer, if I remember right, and then loses one of his friends to a shooting at a coffee shop, and he has to reckon with that death. But the film never reckons with it. And every interesting angle this movie could have went down, the movie seems afraid to go down that avenue. The interesting conflicts that might have come out of this chain of events, the movie just glances off of them and doesn't explore any of them with any sense of depth. And it's frustrating because of that, and it's surface level because of that, and it's boring because of that, and it's unmemorable because of that. Here's one of the big ones. In the Heights is directed by John Chu. It was based on a multiple Tony Award-winning musical written by Lin-Manuel Miranda. It stars Anthony Ramos, Corey Hawkins, Leslie Grace, and Melissa Barrera. Anthony Ramos plays a shop owner in the Washington Heights part of New York City, whose goal is to head back to the Dominican Republic, where he immigrated from, to reopen his father's cantina. And he is sort of the main character in a group of characters that all have dreams in and outside Washington Heights. And the musical is this little slice of life of all these people wanting to reach their goals. Some of which have them staying in Washington Heights forever. Some of them have them dreaming of leaving the Heights. I did not know a lot about this musical going into it. I knew a lot about Hamilton when I went into Hamilton, but I didn't know much about In the Heights. But if there were ever a pairing of source material and director that was perfect, John Chu knocks this thing out of the park. This movie has a sense of culture and a sense of style and a sense of energy that just permeates through every frame of this film. There are parts in which I thought that the film couldn't possibly keep this kind of energy up throughout its entire running time, but somehow it does. And that is because of John Chu's slick direction. Its editing is great. The editing pushes the storyline, pushes the music along in just an energetic way that catches the eye and catches the ear. It's almost flawlessly done. And if you saw Hamilton either in a theater, a Broadway type theater, or a movie theater, or on Disney Plus, this lyricism will catch your ear. It is very much a Lin-Manuel Miranda production. Some of it's a little rough. You can tell he was developing his style as far as what he wanted to do as a lyricist, but all those hallmarks are there. And this is not a musical in the style of something like Hamilton, in that Hamilton is pretty much wall-to-wall music and singing and rapping, whereas In the Heights goes with the old formula, which is talk until you sing, sing until you dance. But in this production, it's more like talk until you rap, rap until you'll sing, sing until you dance. It's got that extra step there. But all the music pops off the screen at you. It's all very energetic and at times incredibly moving. This is one of those films where an edit is incredibly important. And there's one edit in this film where Anthony Ramos's character says one thing in one place with one context, and it hard cuts to him in another place, saying the exact same words, but it meaning something completely different. And it's a great edit. And it's just those little touches that make this movie a little bit more special than your normal run-of-the-mill Hollywood fare. Now, the film is not without its faults. It does have some sketchy green screen at one point in time, which seems strange given how flawless the visuals were up until that point. And the film also has some flights of fancy that I don't know if I necessarily agreed with. There are some dream sequences, which I was fine with. Some sequences where an actor is thinking about the larger world and that larger world comes to life. I'm fine with that. But there are a couple sequences where the characters are talking and doing hand motions about certain things, and then those hand motions become drawings on the screen that move about and animate. And I don't know if I necessarily liked that as much. I was with the flights of fancy, but the more air drawing, I guess, I don't know if I really liked that. I know this movie did not make a lot of money at the box office. I know that musicals are hard sells, especially musicals that are Tony Award winning, but not necessarily as widely known as like your West Side Stories or your Cats. But this movie is well worth seeing for the standout performances from Anthony Ramos, Melissa Barrera. Jimmy Smits is great in this movie. Lin-Manuel Miranda shows up and steals every scene he's in. No, it is not Hamilton. It's not as special as Hamilton is. And the movie version of Hamilton is a magic trick. It is a Hollywood magic trick. It's a miracle that thing exists. This movie is much more conventional Hollywood movie making, but it's still very, very good. A movie that's not very good is Those Who Wish Me Dead, starring Angelina Jolie and Aidan Gillen. This is another movie that was released on HBO Max and theaters at the same time. And it's a movie not a lot of people were talking about. Almost the post-release buzz pretty much died after this thing came out. I was shocked when the movie ended and it said written and directed by Taylor Sheridan. But this seems like a lesser Sheridan project. The direction is pedestrian. The performances are seemingly phoned in. The screenplay is not necessarily concerned with the why of any of this happening. The story is a little boy and his father are escaping some bad men. His father gets shot, the little boy is out on his own, runs into a firefighter played by Angelina Jolie, and then they have to escape the bad men. Why are the bad men chasing them? It's brushed upon. You learn a little bit about why this might be happening, but the details aren't there. So the movie doesn't really come to life because it's just surface level. I kept wanting the details of why any of this was happening, and I also wanted the details just because I thought there might be a twist at the end where there's a relationship we don't know about, or a relationship changes, or the entire situation is not what we expected, but none of that happens. And that's disappointing from a Sheridan script. He's usually a solid screenwriter and creates cool stuff like Sicario, another Taylor Sheridan script, this time directed by Denis Villeneuve and shot by Roger Deakins. It stars Emily Blunt, Josh Brolin, and Benicio del Toro, who all three give great performances in a dark, methodic, textured film that's intense throughout its entire running time. It is about an FBI agent played by Emily Blunt who's brought into another federal investigation to be kind of a patsy so that these other agencies can do things within the United States. She knows it, she's not happy about it, but she's doing it because it's what might be good for the country, and good for her career, and good for a bust at the beginning of the film that goes wrong. She wants to get these guys, and the only way to get there is to join this effort, even if it has some shady elements. I have always heard this movie was pretty good. It's part of a loosely connected, very loosely connected trilogy with Hell or High Water and Wind River. Denis Villeneuve is a visionary director, and this movie looks great throughout its entire running time, and the pacing of the film is spot on. It's always heart-stopping as far as the tension is concerned, and it only ramps up as the film moves on. It's not a film that spoon-feeds you information. It is a film that makes you catch up to it, and in that way it's very rewarding. Unlike that other Taylor Sheridan project we just talked about, which lacked all those details that make this movie fun. Fun in a very dark way. This is an intense film, but it's also a very good one. Silence stars Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver as two Portuguese priests who venture into 1600s Japan to hunt down their mentor, played by Liam Neeson. 1600s Japan was a time in which Christians were heavily persecuted by the Japanese government. Needless to say, it doesn't go well for them. This is a dark, contemplative, heart-wrenching, sometimes shockingly brutal film, and a film that you could tell that Martin Scorsese felt he needed to make. It's weird to say that about a filmmaker because you would think, don't they feel like they need to make every movie? But there are movies like this that are special to filmmakers, and you could tell in the way they construct their film that it's special to them. I think of Steven Spielberg and Schindler's List. That movie, he knew that he was making something special, and this movie for Scorsese feels very personal. This film at times is slow and repetitive. The movie has a refrain of the government of Japan asking these Christians to deface a picture of Jesus. And that situation keeps coming up again and again. And it might seem repetitive, but these two priests are taking everything they've experienced up until that point into that situation again. So we get to see over time how they react differently to being put in the same situation. And I can see how that might make the film feel slow, or the film might be repetitive, but it is evolving over its running time. So the film has this very narrow scope as far as the journeys of these two priests, but it feels like a large-scale, old-school Hollywood film. And by that I mean an old-school Ben-Hur, Ten Commandments, important film vibe that kind of permeates every frame of this thing. And to that end, there is one sequence which dropped my jaw. There's a sequence in which 3 Japanese Christians are crucified on a cross, as you would expect, but placed in water and meant to deal with the tides. There's no way to fake that. These actors were actually doing this. They were just tied to the cross, but the waves were real. You can't fake that. Kudos to those actors who are not big name actors for putting themselves through this, because it happens in long takes, unblinking camera work, unmoving cameras. You as an audience member have to sit there and watch this. And it feels important, and it feels meaningful because of the way it was shot, the way it was not edited, and the way the actors portrayed it. It feels like you're watching something dirty in a way. It feels like you shouldn't be watching this. But it feels like you're meant to be watching it, if that makes any sense. You shouldn't be watching it, although you feel the necessity to watch it. That sequence is shocking and astounding. I don't prefer my Martin Scorsese films to be prestige pictures. I do love The Departed. I loved Goodfellas. I own Raging Bull. I own all of his big films, and I like his big movies. But this feels different. This feels like a different type of Martin Scorsese film. It's not overly violent. There is a few scenes of violence, but they're quick and they don't linger. And it's more contemplative when you compare it to all of his work before this. This is a different type of film for him, but a film that feels like he needed to make it. He needed to get this done. And because of that, we are left with a piece of cinema which is immediate and heartbreaking and rewarding and great. For every week that I've been doing this project that I've watched nothing but crap, this was not that week. I watched some good stuff this week. What have you guys been watching? Anything cool? I will see you on the next one. The next one is going to be one strange one-off movie that you wouldn't expect, and the Hunger Games series, because I bought the last two movies on Blu-ray, which I've never seen. I'll be watching those this weekend, so I'll see you next week with that. Thanks for watching.